Hello, this is the Torg Eternity Delphi Council Debriefings, where the storm has a name. We are your hosts, Leamon, Jay, and Mark, and today we will be continuing with the mega adventure, The Fires of Ra, doing Act 5, Raiders at the Gates. But before that, we do have an email that we promised you last time to read, because it specifically pertains to Fires of Ra. From T. T writes, following my last email, I remember two items pertinent to this adventure. First, where can I find stats on Captain Cairo? I've used Brick Knuckle Branco's stats as a proxy for him, but obviously I'd prefer to use the man himself. First, we discussed this before we started recording. We're pretty sure the one time that he is mentioned as Captain Cairo is a typo, because the picture above it even says Colonel Cairo on it, so we think that that is his official name.
It's in the index.
And in the index. But he doesn't have stats. He doesn't have a stat block. I basically thought that he was kind of written in not to do much except for talk, so that's probably why he either didn't have stat blocks or they weren't put in. Jay had a good solution. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, my players are obsessed with doing things like mind controlling and wanting to know what the NPC stats were. So I just figured he would have the same stats as the mysterious bruiser archetype in the official Nile archetypes, because it uses the same picture. So that was my reasoning there.
So that makes sense to me. So you could use, like you did, Brick Knuckle Branco. He looks like a pretty strong guy with a big ball and chain that he uses, kind of like a mason chain. So I think that would work as a strong character. Mark, did you have any thoughts on the Captain/Colonel Cairo?
I think either approach works well. I think if I remember correctly, the setup in Fires of Ra says that you can sub out any of the villains for any of the other villains when and if you want to, based on needs. So, reskinning Brick Knuckles Branco as a different villain works well, or
he's a hero, right?
Yeah, he's a hero.
Or a hero, excuse me.
He's a hero.
Yeah. My bad.
But same deal.
Yeah.
But reskinning any of the villains as a hero as a villain, however you want to do it, it works. Using the archetype works as well, because, like Jay said, I think that's the picture, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yep.
But art gets recycled a lot.
It does.
So,
I'm
okay.
paging through the Nile Empire mission books because I thought I saw something in there on somebody like this, but I may be thinking of a different hero or villain.
I know he's mentioned because Ensign, I think it's Ensign Egypt, is like his sidekick, and she's shown on a few things. But thank you for that first. Sorry we didn't have actual stats to point to, but I think there's some workarounds for it. Secondly, I would like to share one of our favorite sessions with you. On Hespera, the group just got themselves challenged, and this is what we discussed last time with the Amazons and on the Isle of the Warrior Women. They got themselves challenged to the Episcross, which was the horse-mounted type of lacrosse, soccer, basketball / game. They pitted the Storm Knights against the Nile Empire, and it said that they got themselves challenged as the session ended. So that gave me a week to plan it carefully rather than run it as a simple DSR chase. Although I used Step A to represent taking possession, Step D to represent the opportunities to score for either team, the other steps representing maneuvering and setting up players and the like. Further, conscious that I had a strength character, a dex character, mind character, and a charisma character, I wanted to make sure everyone had something unique to offer the scene. So I took a leaf out of the Gladiator/WWE playbook, awarding characters for playing to the crowd, distracting the referee to cover for cheating, etc., and it really took off. I had allocated half a session to it and had a ripcord built in it just in case the players weren't having fun, but my concerns proved thankfully groundless, and the match lasted the full game session with all the players 100% on board. It probably helped that 2 of my players were classic era WWE fans. I have to say that I'm really grateful at how into it my players got, and their 3-2 win is one of their proudest won victories to date. Anyway, hopefully someone else gives this a try the next time they run a big arena scene. I can promise it'll be a lot of fun. Thanks for keeping the fire lit, T. So thank you, T, for writing that. Jay, what are your thoughts on the little expansion of the contest?
Sounds great. I'm always one for messing around with the DSRs and putting new twists on them and using them in different ways, like we saw with the often maligned dance battle. But I think as long as your players are into it, like, it's one of those things, like, normally I wouldn't necessarily want that to go for an entire session, but if you and your players are really enjoying it and they really got into it and you're like playing people's theme music and everything, then that sounds great. And I think GMs should know, that they are free to change things up. Like, it tells you what it's supposed to be in the adventure, but if you have a better idea, go for it. And the other thing I'll mention is I just did a quick check. Colonel Cairo is in the Nile Empire source book, but no stats. So, see.
And Mark, your thoughts on the Episkros and the changes of the arena game?
Yeah, as Jay said, the write-up for Colonel Cairo is in Nile Empire on page 107, so you can get some more information on his background and who he is, but it does, like you said, it doesn't give you stats. I like the Episkros contest. I think the way that you ran it, T, is fantastic. That's the goal isn't necessarily how you ran it. The goal is that, as you said, your table thought that was fantastic, and that's the way to play. That, to me, if the book says do it this way, but your table's going to have more fun doing it some other way, do it some other way, because that's the goal. And I think you did a great job running it the way that you ran it.
Yeah, I think probably having the week in between is a good thing. You kind of thought things through, presented it in a way that you knew at least a couple of your players would probably like it if you knew that they were, wrestling fans and that. And as Mark said, anytime your players decide that, hey, we want to expand this more than what the book says, let them. There shouldn't, unless you, for whatever reason, do one of those, okay, we are going to start this book at 5 a.m. and we are going to finish at midnight. Unless you're on some like crazy timeline crunch. As if this is just your weekly Friday or Saturday or Tuesday or whatever day that you get together and there's no time limit, let them take as much time as they want on some of these things, because other things that you're going to think are going to last the full session are going to last like a third of the session. So,
True.
And one of the things, completely different mega adventure, completely different situation, but similar in theme of letting the players kind of add to the story, is one that Mark is currently on in Operation Soft Cell, which I read that you made it to a place and there was an actress influencer, and one of the characters always accidentally into the influencer space, and they had like a competition and stuff, and it apparently went over well from what I read from your guys' remarks. So,
oh yeah, we had a good time with that.
So that's just something, it wasn't something when I wrote that act that I ever intended, but it played out, and let it play out. That's what these are the stories I like to hear. I like when anybody has fun, and when anybody kind of changes it a little bit, makes it more fun for their group. That's best for all of us as game masters, because our players are going to do stuff that's crazy that we don't think of. And when they can get invested in it, those are the really cool times that you can throw some things. So thank you very much for emailing us, and anybody can email us at torgdcd@gmail.com. And like this email, we'll read it. This was only one question. We'll answer questions if we can. We'll comment on the comments and things. So thank you very much. Very glad that you had fun in that. But let's go ahead and move into Act 5, Raiders at the Gate. To set up the act, basically way back in the first few acts, the group was trying to get the Eye of Sebek, which was a source that was going to be used as a weapon. The way that the game, the adventure assumes will happen is that the Hooded Cobra obtains that, kind of takes it from the Storm Knights, and it was the purpose of that was to put it on this flying fortress known as the Manned Jet. And this act here has the Manned Jet has started flying around and attacking places and destroying places, taking over places, and every type of assault that has tried to go against it has failed. So you can almost imagine it like a Death Star going around on a smaller scale, and all the other people trying to fight it aren't doing anything. So one of the things that this act is trying to do is get the blueprints for the Manned Jet, so you can find the hidden weaknesses or whatever and progress to actually being able to take out the Manned Jet. So this one here is the Raiders at the Gate. Overall, Jay, what are your thoughts about this act?
This is a funny act because when I initially read the adventure, this is actually one of the acts I was the most looking forward to, because it's very directly about the actual events, right? The Manned Jet's flying around, it's blasting people, you need to get in and get the thing for it. So it's very direct. It's got kind of like some, although I can't remember, yeah, it was up in it. It had some Rogue One energy, kind of going in there. And it also harkened back to a lot of classic Torg things. So you had the Idol, the Darkness device. You had Mobius himself possibly could show up. You had the Omegatron. So there was a lot of cool callbacks and things. But the thing, I guess as a GM, you got to sometimes remember is that your players, especially if they're new to Torg, may not care about any of that. Right? So I was like, it's the Omegatron, and they're like, okay, whatever. I was like, wow. Okay. So, and this happened in Revenge of the Caradon as well, kind of at the beginning. There, because it's like, oh, this stuff's happening with this person, and we're like, oh, we don't really care. It's like, so that's sort of a reminder for GMs. Make sure. Don't ham-fist it, but make sure your players know what these things are. If you can highlight them ahead of time in other adventures, like they should be afraid of the Omegatron. It should be something that, people threaten you with in previous Nile adventures, like straighten up or we're going to drag you to the Omegatron, stuff like that. So, just try to seed things and make sure people know. Like, also, Dr. Frest is another... he's a major NPC, but if you don't give him enough of an introduction, players are like, who? So that was my biggest thing with this, and the thing I would have done worked much more on when I ran it. But otherwise, it ran pretty smooth. I don't remember the specifics of a lot of the specific combats, but we did have a very dramatic, not very dramatic event at the end, which we'll get to.
Okay, Mark, your thoughts overall for the Raiders at the Gates?
So this act has some of the most iconic Nile Empire stuff in it, as Jay mentioned, the Omegatron. You're also going to get to encounter the Darkness device, and you've got walking gods underneath the sands. That was one of the biggest fights I've run this book multiple times, and the walking god that's right off the bat in scene one, which we'll get to in a minute. It's a dangerous fight. It's one of the most dangerous fights that I've run in the Nile Empire, and you'll see when we get to it. But there is, like as Jay pointed out, there foreshadowing it, however you can do it. Use like for a mission brief. If you're going to run some stuff that's going to the Nile Empire, use Frest as the person who gives the mission brief, because he's a Nile Empire guy. Get them to know who Frest is when they play maybe a connection card for Nile Empire, and you have somebody delivering things or explaining how they've decided they want a weird science gadget. Frest happens to explain how, have them show up, that kind of thing. Drop Frest in, because if you played old school Torg, you know who Frest is, and he's a big deal. And there's a reason you want to play Frest up in this book, which, without dropping spoilers, which you're going to want to do later. You want them to know Frest, and you want them to care about Frest. Okay, so however you do that, if they're playing contact cards in this book, maybe Frest is the guy who shows up, zips in, like Q, like in Bond. Q sometimes zips in and gives Bond his toy, and then he gets back in the cab and they go away, something like that. You really do want to try and figure out ways that Frest can make some more appearances, more than just he's written in certain places, but use him, because you'll see. This is I think though that this act needs a little prep, because there are some iconic things in here, like the Omegatron, that you want them to not just, as Jay said, oh, whatever, and move on. It needs to have an impact. And I'm not sure how you do that with your table.
Yeah, this act I enjoyed because one of my characters was playing a Nile mathematician, and as we'll get into, this deals with a complex that is Nile mathematician and engineering stuff. So that kind of gave it a personal feel for that player, and then that player having that personal tie got the other players involved. And this is one case where I used a connection card to be a connection to a place instead of a person. And we'll get that when we talk about scene one. But yeah, this is a pretty cool standard Nile Empire thing. It reintroduces a lot of people, Hooded Cobra, Dr. Frest, and which I used a different Hockney Urbany is the Tinkerer character that is in my group, so he came out to do his thing. And so let's just jump into scene one, the Jaws of Sebek. So Jay, your thoughts on the Jaws of Sebek?
This was so to recall, for my group earlier in the adventure, did not capture Hooded Cobra. Mm-hmm. They did acquire the Eye of Sebek, so the manned jet is not fully operational. Mm-hmm. It's still flying around and blasting stuff, but it's not like razing entire cities with the breath of Ra. But it does still have the impenetrable force field, which no one can get past, hence why the Storm Knights are going on this mission. However, they never acquired the map from Hooded Cobra because he was never captured. So they had to be told about it, and this is I mentioned I ran Cats of Khartoum ahead of time, and then I think I had just moved them to Thebes, so they had an already existing underground mummy network kind of going on here. So they ended up going through that, and the entrance to the library was found that way. So the mummies informed the Delphi Council informed them. So they were showing up and had to be shown. They were led there by cats and everything. So they go in, and when they explore, it's basically there's a secret tunnel, and go this scene is going through that tunnel. There's a few encounters. One of them, and I remember people kept asking about this on the forums back when this came out, about all of the tunnel whips. There's a corridor with a bunch of holes, and these like little spider-like creatures. Well, they're not little, but they're real. They're real creatures, but they're larger than normal. And the description of them, as I was like describing what was going on around, like you're going through this corridor and you can hear scuttling noises behind you, you could see holes in the walls, and every once in a while you just catch the sight of something moving behind the hole, and my players were scared like out of their minds, like what was coming out. And then when the things finally came out, they just like smashed them completely and didn't take any damage. So I mean, it was still fun just to see their reaction to it. So then they were feeling all overconfident and came out to the water where there's this big statue of Sebek. And if they get too close to it, it turns to them and demands that they do something. What was it that it actually wants them to do again? Like to have a password or something? But if they don't have it, which they don't, they end up having to fight it. And as Mark said, a walking god is a big deal. I don't remember exactly what happened. However, I remember that Akrik, the Edinos optant of Lanala, somehow, I think it might have even been a mistaken identity card or something, passed himself off as an avatar of Sebek, and because he also had the Eye of Sebek with him, and so they were able to just get past it. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm pretty sure that is what happened. So I mean, that worked out, and Akrik has been carrying this thing around and collecting shinies. So I think he gathered some more Sebek related gold in the chamber, and he's really been blinging himself out like a pharaoh this whole time now. So yeah, they kind of just made their way through, and then they bump into. That happens after actually. So they got through without having to do the big dangerous fight.
Mark, your thoughts on scene 1, the Jaws of Sebek?
So the tunnel whips. I love the fact that your group was scared to death of them and perceived them as this great big frightening. It might maybe even a death trap. I mean, play it up. Not everything has to be what it is perceived as, and it's sometimes it's perfectly okay to have things like this be this is just it's not. But we thought this was going to be this great big thing, and it's not. It's just okay, smash, and we move on. And it was kind of that way for my my groups too. The water that they had to crossing sacred water, trying to move forward to get into Thebes. That was like, what are we doing? They were waiting for something to come out of the water, and they were very panicked about the water itself, which was not. It's just caves, right? But when you get to the walking god of Sebek, and it's this combat, because the closing there says anybody who wants to go forward into Thebes must face the guardian first. You've got these 3 obstacles that the way I played it and the way I read it was that each round one of these obstacles popped up. So you had the first round where they start dealing with the walking god, and the next round I had the grinding sound in the chamber begins to spin, which causes all kinds of problems. You got dexterity and dexterity problems, or you become stymied, and that was, oh my gosh, and it made it harder, right? And then you've got the stalactites that are falling, and then it picks up speed, making the dexterity checks even more difficult. So this was a very, very played that way. This is a very difficult fight, and and everybody was very challenged on it. Nile Empire, to me, from a player's perspective, is not terribly challenging from a combat standpoint. In a game that's skewed towards the players, the Nile Empire is skewed even more towards the players, and that's fine. That's just what the Nile Empire is. I like it. I like playing in it. It's a lot of fun. Larger than life characters get to do larger than life things, and that's the way that it should be. This fight kind of, because that's how you consciously or subconsciously, you kind of get this as I can do almost anything in the Nile Empire because I'm pretty invulnerable. That makes this more dangerous if you're not careful, because the Walking God is no joke. He really is tough. This is a tough fight. So GMs, be familiar with how your Walking God works. Think about what you're going to do with the obstacles on this and how you're going to play it, who your Storm Knights are, and how you may or may not want to play that, because the Walking God could squash a party without thinking twice, and then you're done at scene 5 and you miss out on a whole bunch of stuff.
So I enjoyed, again, this act. I had a similar situation as Jay. The Hooded Cobra, the original Hooded Cobra, died when one of the characters martyred herself and presented him with the grenade instead of the Eye of Sebek, so they did not get the they didn't get the plans or the location off of him. And that was a different group that then this group kind of took off from. But since the character had, or the player had a character who was a Nile Empire mathematician, played a connection card at the beginning, was like, oh, this is, something I might know somebody from. And I decided to use it as a connection to the place. That pre-invasion, this is where she was a student. I had it as like a university. And her thing was she knew a secret entrance that the kids in the dorm would go out and have fun, that type of thing. So she found the secret entrance, led them into it, and after a little while, things started changing because it had transformed. So instead of a tunnel through the boiler room and something like that, it ended up going into this abandoned tomb, basically. And so they got through to the tunnel whips and then the walking god. And it's not that I don't remember this fight, it's that I know it was there. I just don't remember specifics, but I think that's because just previous to it, they had the really big fight with the Amazons and the Eternity Pool, and then prior to that, they had the almost TPK, total party kill, when all the cards and dice rolled bad the first couple of rounds. That even though this was tough, it wasn't they rolled well enough that it wasn't the dire straits that it could have been. So there are times where really easy stuff, you roll bad and it gets dangerous, and then there's other stuff that is potentially bad, but through good rolls becomes easier. And I know it wasn't a cakewalk, but it was one of those things where the story aspect of it and how it was connected with the Nile Empire mathematician kind of in my mind is what I remember from this more than the actual fights. But then they get through all the obstacles and they end up inside of the mathematician engineering complex that has these the plans to the manned jet. And then we go into scene 2, Let's Make a Deal. So, Jay, your thoughts on Let's Make a Deal?
So naturally, as soon as the Storm Knights enter into the school, the palace, the library, whatever we're calling it, they bump face to face with the Hooded Cobra. So I immediately played his theme music, and the players are like, no. And so he's basically saying, like, look, I want something, you want something, we can work together. He wants the Storm Knights to go into the library and get a report that other people were snitching on him about. And in return, he'll tell them where to find the data they're looking for because he doesn't really care. He doesn't care what happens to the Manjet. He just wants his position. My players all just told him to screw off and called his bluff and said that he basically intimidated him and said, "You're not going to do anything because you're a wuss," like all this stuff. And he's like, "You'll rue the day." And he ran off. But then they found Lady Hourglass there as well, and they made a deal with her instead because someone had previously romanced her, as discussed. And so the idea was they were not only going to. So now that they knew that there was this report about Hooded Cobra, they were going to replace it with an even more damning report now. And the idea was to get Lady Hourglass to supplant Hooded Cobra to become the head of the Retribution League. But then everything went to hell, so it didn't really work out. So they did get stopped by guards, but this time, because it was Lady Hourglass with them, she didn't just continue on like Hooded Cobra's supposed to. And they did some pretty good fast talking, so they got through pretty easily until they went by the Keftri idol, and they looked into it. And so, if you recall, one of the characters in this group was Jack, the mongrel they call him. He's the core Earth Australian soldier of fortune with loose to no morals. And so he starts hearing the call from the darkness device. And he's like, "Oh, this is a great idea." And he starts moving in, and like the rest of the group has to physically stop him. And the player is asking, "Is there a roll I need to make to resist it?" I'm like, "No, it's totally up to you." He's like, "I can fail a roll." I'm like, "No, it's up to you." So everyone else knows it's your choice that you're doing this. But eventually he relented and let everybody pull him away. I think they ended up in the Omegatron room and didn't free the guy in there because
that's next scene.
Oh, that's next scene.
Next
Sorry.
scene, right?
Okay, so so that's where it left off. Like they were going into the rooms.
So, Mark, your thoughts on Let's Make a Deal?
Okay, so this is Hooded Cobra's close up, Mr. DeMille. This is an excellent opportunity to RP Hooded Cobra, and it's my hope that Hooded Cobra has managed to survive until this point. But if he hasn't, because your team is so sick and tired of his theme music, or however you introduce him, which is perfectly fine, feel free to insert any of the other villains in this role, because you can. Hooded Cobra is just the natural one for this position. Once you emerge from the tunnels and you're at Thebes, keep in mind that this is moving around essentially an ancient Egyptian city that's been completely refurbished. It's not a modern Cairo. It's not the Indiana Jones Cairo mud and wattle huts with the bazaar and the trucks and stuff. This is an ancient Egyptian city with the statues and the limestone blocks and all of the trappings that go with it. Sphinx lining the streets, all of that. But you can do it because you're Storm Knights, right? And it's the Nile Empire, and you just cover your face and it's with a cloth, and you're fine. Consider how, because your Storm Knights are going to pop into Hooded Cobra's room at some point, you want to consider, James, you want to consider how your Storm Knights are going to approach or handle the suddenly realizing that they're face to face with Hooded Cobra, or whatever villain you've chosen. And I would suggest that you choose the villain that has the most RP value. If they've played Nemesis on somebody, that's a perfect choice for this. Hooded Cobra, I like Hooded Cobra just because he is annoying and everybody gets tired of him escaping, and now he's standing right here and he's just offering to work with you and talk, and this should not be a fighting scene. This should be an RP scene, in my opinion. But keep in mind that Hooded Cobra, because he is Hooded Cobra, he has free reign to move around Thieves and do what he wants to do, and he really does mean he means it when he says he wants to work together. He will work together to a point to get what he wants, and that point, as Jay pointed out, is he wants that folder, that report on him, because he knows his goose is cooked if that report gets to Mobius. And he really doesn't care about, I mean, he cares about the Man Jet only so far as it advances him in the Nile Empire. But the moment that the Man Jet doesn't advance him, he doesn't care about it. So if he can trade the Man Jet for that report, he's absolutely going to do it. Now, once he gets his hands on the report, he's absolutely going to sound the alarm and turn traitor on the Storm Knights, because Nile Empire, right? But you've got some currency with that report, so make sure that you're thinking about how your Storm Knights are going to approach Hooded Cobra, what Hooded Cobra is willing to do, what he can do, what he can't do, what you've got in your bag that you can have him do. But he really does want to help. And the Apophis, when they walk by the room with Apophis, the darkness device, that's, you got to know who you're whispering to, because that's whoever your player is who's going to role play that really well, who's got that weak moment, like Jay said, oh, this sounds like a great idea, and let me suck one guy away from the party to come over here and talk to me. Apophis doesn't really want to join with somebody else, but he's willing to interview candidates, as it were. Let's see what you're made of. You think you might be a candidate? Okay, let's see what you're made of. And it's a great opportunity to, it should be in a non-threatening way, introduce Mobius, because he can show up, and if they're trying to figure out if they're supposed to fight him or not, when you have 16 Gospog of the third planning and 20 shock troopers rally to his cry to get them, that ought to be a clue that we shouldn't be here. So now let's beat feet. Maybe you do a chase, which Leamon hates. Maybe you just have them, you hand wave it and say, okay, they get out, because they've chosen. Now, do you want to fight? You shouldn't. You shouldn't. Anyway, this is a great opportunity here. Maybe Mobius points with a finger and says, "Get them. My Omegatron needs more Storm Knights." That ought to be ominous enough, hints that, and a little foreshadowing that we're going to get into in scene 3.
So yeah, as similar to Jay's, my characters got rid of Hooded Cobra. I would have brought him back, because it's Nile Empire, except for a player used a martyr card, sacrificed her character. So then I was like, who would I replace him with? And that's when I decided to do a legacy character and have a Hooded Cobra's daughter find his secret lair and his identity, and assume the mantle. And so what she was there for was to get files that detailed who Hooded Cobra was, and she wanted to alter them, not just to scratch out or erase the mess ups and make it sound, but to put herself in it. So no, he's not male, he's female, and change it so that it would reflect on her. When the party got there, it was a different party, as I've stated earlier, that I had one party do the first couple of acts, and then another party did everything else. So, but they had the report. They had the debriefing of that original group, and they're trying to go, wait, did they mess up this much? They don't have this right, they don't have this right, but the name's the same, the outfit's the same, the guns are the same. And then they start going, is this like a spy who's just pretending to be Hooded Cobra? So they decided to work with this new Hooded Cobra that they weren't sure is this a villain? Is this a hero pretending to be a villain? And so it like actually added a lot more intrigue because what they knew was completely contradictory to the hooded cobra standing in front of them. And that hooded cobra didn't know about this group because this is not the group that killed her daddy. This is it was a different Storm Knight group. So it was a little more. It wasn't. Don't want to say friendly, but it was a little more amicable than what it could have been if it would have been the same two groups. But they went. They were able to get the papers. The Nile mathematician was able to pull some strings, and that she had worked there or went to school, whatever. She was an archaeologist type that was there. I do want to say this, and Mark, when you GM'd it, this was one that Mike playing the lone rocket ranger was like, I say was a shock trooper in this.
That's coming up in scene 3.
Right.
That's scene 3.
But this is the fast talking where he first started saying it, and we were still like, oh, wow, you really, we still thought he was a Storm Knight from the beginning, and this was just us, quote unquote, joking that he was actually a villain. So this leading up to next scene is hilarious because that's when the switch was flipped, from off to on, and everything was finally revealed. But this one was just a more setup of like, man, you really do keep stretching this whole you were, a villain before, or you are a villain, because of the things that you're doing that don't make sense. And, yeah, you're mind controlled, but were you really, type stuff going on. So that was fun. I remember that I was probably the character that got asked about from the cafeteria idol to the dark one. He didn't really take it too much serious. I know my group, every single player of that specific group is playing the hero, so no temptation whatsoever. It was just a flat nope, not going to do it. And then they got out of there before Dr. Mobius or Pharaoh Mobius could actually see them, point them out, etc. So then let's move into scene 3, sudden and inevitable. So Jay, scene 3.
I don't remember why, but they got split up for some reason. Because I know there was 2 of them in the Omegatron room, and then the rest with Lady Hourglass in the Hall of Records, or the Hall of Scrolls. And all I know is that the ones that were in with the Omegatron messed around with it for a little bit, but were too scared to touch it, like to go inside, so they just left it and rejoined the rest of them. And then eventually you're going to get to a point in the Hall of Scrolls, even if you manage to bluff your way through completely, you're going to be asked to present us like an identification that allows you to look at this, and none of them have it. So the jig is up, and I'm going, thank God they're not running their original characters who would have just mind controlled the guy to hand it over and then erased his memory of it ever happening, and I would have to explain what happens next. But that would probably be simple enough, because basically the alarm is sounded, they see Hooded Cobra run up with a bunch of shock troopers smirking at them, and then the doors seal, so they have this fight with some shock troopers and some priests, which it was not very difficult. They never encountered the Gospog, because it says the Gospog take like a full minute to arrive, which in Torg combats is basically they don't show up unless something crazy is going on. But they do find the secret escape hatch, and basically Lady Hourglass was seen with them and doing this, so she's got to book it as well. Now, like, she's been made, so they're all escaping, and they crawl out, fairly unscathed. Except, it's at this point I should start mentioning, One of my players was away at a business meeting this night, so that was Dr. Oswald, the Ororsh alchemist. And I've had a long-standing rule. It doesn't really apply as much in Torg, but for D&D and other games like that, I will say that if you are away, I can either run your character as a GM PC, where they're kind of going to fade into the background, and maybe if someone asks them to do something, they'll do it, but they only get half XP. Or one of the other players can control them, and they can use them as a full PC, and they get full experience. And so we've kind of just had that as the standard rule, even in Torg. So one of the other players was controlling him. And Ozzy is one of those academics, with a strength of 5. So he took a few hits at this point, which will be important coming up later.
Mark, your thoughts on Scene 3, Sudden and Inevitable.
So this was perhaps one of the most dramatic moments of the streaming table in the entire book. Happens here. We did have Cool Hand Earp gloriously read a shock trooper's mind at the Hall of the Omegatron. But as I recall, we had a split in the party at this point where there was a fire and getting the plans out and all this stuff happens. But yeah, so Mike is the lone Rocket Ranger, and he's in a Rocket Ranger suit, and he's been running around, and everybody's, as Leamon pointed out, everybody's been like, what's going on? Because he's not actually doing all this amazing Rocket Ranger stuff that he should be doing. He's not as good at it as he should be, and it kind of brings in some questions. And he played a mistaken identity, to be mistaken for an elite shock trooper named Poindexter Stormfollow. And it's at this point that he pulls his helmet. Nobody's seen him with his helmet off. And if they have, it's been kind of glancing. He pulls his helmet off and plays this mistaken identity, and everybody begins to treat him as though he's someone who works directly for Mobius. And it's at this point where Lady Hourglass mind controls him, and a star-crossed romance gets played on Lady Hourglass, and she suddenly realizes that all the attention he's been paying her really is amorous attention and very complimentary. And his true identity gets revealed as being a former Storm. This was in Mike's backstory for his character from the moment that he started playing, and he has no idea that he didn't read the book. He didn't know what was coming up. And his backstory is that he is a reformed shock trooper who found a suit of Rocket Ranger armor, put it on, and started becoming a hero to redeem himself. And when he takes his helmet off here with the mistaken identity card, he's not being mistaken for anybody. Because he told me when he gets ready to do this, he says, "This is what I want to do." He said that his real identity comes out as to who he was before this Stormfellow guy, and he really did work with Mobius, and everybody recognizes him and treats him such, and he gets the benefit of the card the way card's supposed to be played. But his backstory played into the book like it was written to be here, and it just was an amazing event when everybody's like, "Wait, what? What?" And he's like, "Yeah, no, this is," and the game stopped as he had to explain, "No, this is what I've written, this is what I gave Mark at the beginning, and this is who I am, etc., etc." And what we talked about my character concept, and it just worked so well at this moment. It is one of the best gaming moments that I've ever been privileged to be a part of. Just the way that everything fit together so well. And I'm going to stop for a second, Leamon. You have anything you want to add to that?
That's what we were just like. Okay, that's why you have Colt 45s, but don't have fire combat, or that's why you did it that way. That's why it's like we just were like, man, you just really messed up making your character. You're going for that role playing instead of the min maxing, okay? But no, it was funny because there were things he was not doing, but was being controlled to do, and since it kept happening to him, that's where it started as you're just working for the enemy, you're just undercover, and then it gets to this point where all of those accusations in character but out of character, we didn't believe it, actually were true, that our characters were smarter than us as players.
It really, he's using these guns, but he sucks at them, and he's like, no, I don't have it. He would, in roll 20, when you roll something that you don't have skills in, it shows you that you're unskilled. And so he would roll fire combat, unskilled, and they're like, hey, and routinely we set that stuff up and we screw it up because there's a lot of stuff going on. And like, oh, are you really unskilled at this? Oh, no, I screwed that up. Let me go fix that. And he's like, no, I don't have any ranks in fire combat. And everybody's like, you're a rocket ranger. Why wouldn't you have fire combat? That doesn't make any sense. He's like, no, this is my build. But he's got
put him elsewhere. My dex is good enough.
That's right. Yeah. And I'm sitting here going, well, I know why he did it. It really came out really, really well. And the card play in this with the mistaken identity and the star-crossed romance, and then at the end when Hooded Cobra trots in, they played a nemesis on him at that point, and it went horribly south, but it was fantastic. And let me not shortchange the Omegatron, because pulling out the villain or the hero from the Omegatron, it really had an impact. It really, really went over well. And I can't remember, was it who was it that took I can't remember who took the wound, but somebody actually took a wound to get this guy out, and it was whoever wrote this scene. It played exactly the way that I think it played exactly the way they wanted it to, because everybody was horrified by what was going on, and nobody wanted to go back in there, and the appropriate level of disgust and fear of the Omegatron was instilled in the players and the heroes at that point. So this scene really, really played exceptionally well, and because they set the Hall of Records on fire as a cover to get out once they got the plans. As one does. And let's see what. Let's see. Lady Hourglass and Killingsworth are shooting at Hooded Cobra because they see him, and that's where they're who's SAK? Sir Arthur Killingsworth. He's opposing a mind control, and then he shoots Hood. That he was mind controlled, and he shot Hooded Cobra with a 42 and did 34 points of damage to him. And this was great. Crag, the player, played Maelstrom, and that which immediately cut off all possibilities, so Hooded Cobra couldn't soak. And so he goes down. And he tried to use a minion, and that failed. And that's where we lose Hooded Cobra. Let's see. We had a. Oh yeah, so Lady Hourglass took over the Retribution League at that point. All kinds of stuff going on. I got all kinds of notes on that. Let's see. I'm going to stop reading because it's dead air on the stream, and that's not good. It was really, 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 really good. They got the plans out. It was dramatic. There was fire. There was combat. There were mind control. The card play. It was fantastic. It was one of the best. It was one of the best role playing events I've been a part of, and I really enjoyed it.
So yeah, I think there. It seems like there's something that wants you to split the party.
Yeah.
It looks like from my reading that there's two guards. If you don't take them both out, the other one will set an alarm that will call some enemy, and they can make it into a chamber where one person can kind of fight everything and kind of keep it on lockdown. At that time, they might discover the secret passage that leads to the Megatron. So it's kind of like there's a fight going on, but then there's a guy, stuck in this Megatron. We're heroes, and a couple of the people went in there, and inside the Megatron is completely dark blackness, and they hear like a voice, and it's like reaching in, and it's almost like reaching into a void, that's starting to consume them. They have to make reality checks, otherwise they take wounds that armor doesn't protect against. It does say that they can soak it, and depending on what your reality is in outstanding, if you roll an outstanding reality, you still will suffer a wound and 2 shock. So it's very deadly. The player that went in after like the first round, and he like failed getting the was a Diamond Jack Murphy out, took some damage and was like, oh, I don't have a lot of this before. He was getting his martyr card ready to get the guy out if he was going to die. But they got the guy out. They were able to take down at the same time that the Nile Empire Gospaga, the third planting and shock troopers and stuff, were fighting the rest of them. And then they made it to the Hall of Scrolls, were able to get the plans, and get out because of the unknown who the Hooded Cobra was, and the Hooded Cobra not really knowing who the Storm Knights were. They more or less split without, like, I got my stuff, I'm gone. We got our stuff, we're gone. Better not see each other, in the future type thing. But there wasn't that absolute hatred that I can completely see if this would have been my first group going in, and them, there being another Hooded Cobra. So that actually worked out kind of interesting, and yeah, it's a very nice scene that has a lot of stuff going on, and players need to make choices. Are you going to try to rescue the guy once you take damage, or are you still going to continue to rescue the guy? You're Storm Knights, but man, if you fail, it starts off with 4 wounds and 8 shock. That's defeat stuff if you don't have possibilities to soak. So then we have finished scene 3. We will pick up next time with scene 4 and 5.
There only is 4.
There's only 4.
Oh,
there's only one more scene left.
Oh, there's normally 5. I just assumed. And I shouldn't have. So yeah, we will start with scene 4, and then probably get into Act 6, I believe, is the next one. So until then, we hope you enjoyed this episode. We do remind you can email us at torgdcd@gmail.com, and you can give us questions, give us adventures that you had when you were going through Fires of Ra. But until next time, we hope you have fun in your own Cosmverse. Bye.